The piercing wails of a woman filled the night air, cutting through the silence like a sharp knife. Amara knelt in the middle of the dusty village square, a wrapper half loose around her trembling body. Her face was streaked with tears, her voice hoarse from screaming. "Somebody tell me this is not true," she cried, clutching the lifeless body of her only son, Obina. The villagers stood in stunned silence, their faces heavy with pity and fear. No one dared to speak. No one dared to meet her eyes. They all knew the truth. Her son's death was not natural. It was a punishment, a consequences of a sin Amara had committed long ago. 15 years ago, Amara had been the most beautiful girl in Umuchieze village. Every young man desired her, but her heart belonged to only one, Ezina. They had sworn to love each other forever, but fate had other plans. Chief Okafo, the wealthiest man in the village, had his eyes on Amara. He was old enough to be her father, but his riches silenced every protest. Amara's parents, blinded by greed, forced her into marriage with the chief. On the night before her wedding, Amara and Ezinna met under the old Udala tree. "Run away with me," Ezinna pleaded, his voice desperate. "We can start a new life somewhere, far from here." Tears streamed down Amara's face as she stayed on the ground. "I can't," she whispered. "My parents, they will never forgive me." Ezina looked at her, his eyes filled with pain. "Then I will curse this day forever," he said, his voice breaking. "May happiness never find you in that house. May the tears you shed today follow you forever." Amara gasped, reaching for him, but he was already walking away, his back rigid with heartbreak. Amara thought for a second. Is this the man that claimed to have loved me? But years passed, and marriage was a nightmare. Chief Okafor was cruel, treating her like property. He took in other wives, each one younger than the last. Amara was forgotten, cast aside like an old cloth. Her only source of joy was her son, her only son, Obina. He was her light, her reason for living. But fate was not done punishing her. Obina grew ill suddenly. His body withered. His eyes lost their shine. Amara did everything. Herbs, prayers, even sacrifice. Nothing worked. And then, one night, he took his last breath in her arms. Back to the present. Amara rocked her son's lifeless body, her cries echoing into the night. Then, from the shadows, a voice spoke. "You were warned, Amara," the voice said. She turned, her tear-filled eyes widened. Ezina stood there, older, worn by time, but his eyes still burned with the same pain from years ago. "You were warned," he repeated. Amara let out a scream, a sound of sorrow, regret, and the unbearable weight of a curse fulfilled. The night swallowed her cries, and the villagers whispered among themselves, knowing that some tears never dry, and some sins are never forgotten, neither forgiven. Amara's cries haunted the village for days. She refused to let go of Obina's body, cradling him in her arms, rocking him as if she would will life back into him. It took 4 strong men to pray her son away, and when they buried him, she collapsed at his graveside. Her spirit chattered. For days she did not eat, she did not speak. She sat in front of her hut, staring blankly at the world that had turned against her. The villagers whispered that madness had finally claimed her. But Amara was not mad. She was waiting. And on the 7th night after Obina's burial, Amara heard footsteps, slow, steady, and familiar. She lifted her head and saw him. "Ezina," He stood in the dim moonlight, watching her with unreadable eyes. The same man who had once sworn to love her. The same man who had cursed her. "You have taken everything from me," Amara whispered, her voice hollow. Ezina did not flinch. "I only spoke what the gods had already decided." Amara laughed bitterly. "The gods?" She stood slowly, her free body shaking. "Or your own wounded pride?" And there was silence. Ezina's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Amara took a step closer, her eyes burning with something dark and dangerous. "If I must suffer for my choice, then so must you." For the first time, Ezina hesitated. "What are you talking about?" "You think your course was the end?" she whispered. "No, Ezina, my tears will follow you too. Until your dying breath, you will know no peace." The wind howled through the trees as if the gods themselves had heard her vow. Ezina's face paled, but it turned and disappeared into the night. Days later, strange things began to happen in Umuchieze. Ezina's farm, once the most fertile in the village, withered overnight. His livestock fell sick, one after the other, their bodies swelling before they died. His pregnant wife lost their child in a way too gruesome for words. The villagers began to talk. "Amara has called upon something dark," they whispered. Ezina knew it too. He felt it, an invisible weight pressing against his chest. The airy whisper in the wind when he tried to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Amara's face, her tears, her pain, her curse. One night, unable to bear it anymore, he stormed into Amara's hut. "What have you done?" he shouted, grabbing her by the shoulder. "What have you called upon?" Amara smiled, slow, haunting. "The same ghost you invoked, Ezina." He stumbled back, a cold shiver running down his spine. "You wanted me to suffer," Amara said, stepping closer. "Now you will know what it means to drown in your own tears." Ezina fell to his knees, breathless, the weight of her words sinking deep into his soul. The gods were not finished, and neither was Amara. Ezina lay on the cold, hard ground of his compound, drenched in sweat. His body trembled, his breath shallow. He had not slept for days. Every night the shadows whispered his name. Every night unseen hands choked him awake. Amara's curse had taken root. The villagers avoided him now. His once loyal friends crossed the road when they saw him. His wives whispered behind his back. Even the elders, once his protectors, refused to intervene. It was said that when the gods punish a man, no one dares to stand in their way. At the far end of the village, Amara sat in front of her hut. Her eyes dull, her body frail, but something about her had changed. She no longer wept. She no longer pleaded. She was no longer the Amara who had begged the gods for mercy. She was the Amara who had been reborn in sorrow. One evening, an elder, Inyoma, came to her. "Amara," she said cautiously, "it is time to put an end to this. Ezina is dying." Amara did not blink. "Did the gods listen when I begged for my son's life?" Ezina was silent. "The gods are taking my child." Amara continued, her voice hollow. "They took my happiness. Let them now take my enemy too." Onyoma sighed. "Hatred will turn your heart to stone, my child. You must cleanse yourself before you are lost forever." But Amara only turned away. That night, Ezina could not breathe. He clutched his chest, gasping, feeling invisible fingers squeezing the life out of him. He fell to the ground, choking. He tried to scream, but no sound came. Then the door creaked open. Barefoot, draped in white, Amara stood in the doorway. You wanted me to weep forever, she whispered. Now you will know what it means to beg for life. Ezina crawled toward her, tears spilling down his face. Amara, please, he gasped. I was blinded by pain. I never meant for this. Amara watched him struggle, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she knelt before him. You once loved me, she said softly, and yet you cursed me. Ezina sobered. I was a fool, Amara. I have suffered enough. Please forgive me. A long silence passed. Then, for the first time in months, Amara's eyes softened. The wind outside stilled. The spirits waited. Finally, she placed a hand on Ezina's forehead. Let the gods judge you now, she whispered. At that moment, a deep silence filled the hut. Ezina collapsed into unconsciousness. His body, once weak and failing, suddenly stilled. When he woke up the next morning, it was different. The curse had lifted, but at a price. His once strong body had withered beyond repair. His hair, once full, had turned white overnight. His sight had dimmed, and his voice, once weak. The gods had spared him, but they had left him broken. A man stripped of power, of wealth, of pride. Ezina, the once great farmer, now lived as a shadow of himself. And as for Amara, she disappeared from the village that very night. Some say she walked into the forest and never returned. Others say she became something more, something beyond human, a spirit forever, wandering in search of her lost son. But one thing remained certain: her tears had dried, and the gods had finally spoken. I hope you enjoyed this story. If this is your first time, you are welcome to my channel. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you for your support. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales from Tales by Sosa. Please drop a comment below for us to know what you think about our stories. Until next time, thank you for watching.